There's a strange thing that happens when financial advice goes viral. Everyone shares it. Everyone talks about how brilliant it is. Everyone agrees it's genius. And then everyone tries it. And quietly, without anyone admitting it publicly, almost everyone fails at it. Japanese budgeting systems have this problem worse than most. They look brilliant on paper. They have beautiful names and elegant philosophies. They've worked for Japanese families for decades. Financial influencers post about them constantly. And thousands of people try them, convinced this is finally the system that will fix their finances. And then they fail. Not because the systems are bad, but because context matters, culture matters. What works in one environment doesn't always transplant cleanly to another. And some of these genius Japanese budget systems fail spectacularly when Western families try to implement them without understanding why they worked in Japan in the first place. If you've tried a Japanese budgeting method and failed, if you felt like you were doing something wrong because this genius system didn't work for you, you're not alone and you're not broken. You just tried to use a tool designed for a different context. Let's discover together which 5 genius Japanese budget systems fail most often and exactly why they don't work the way you think they should. Before we dive into the failures, we need to understand something important. These systems aren't bad. They're not scams. They genuinely work for the people and contexts they were designed for. But they fail for specific, predictable reasons when you try to force them into a life they weren't built for. That's not a criticism of the systems. It's a reality check about transplanting cultural practices without understanding the full context. Failed System 1, the strict cash envelope method in a digital payment world. The envelope system is one of the most celebrated Japanese budgeting techniques. At the beginning of the month, you withdraw your entire budget in cash. You divide it into labeled envelopes for each spending category: food, transportation, entertainment, personal spending. When an envelope is empty, you stop spending in that category until next month. On paper, this is genius. It makes money tangible. It creates hard limits. It prevents overspending through sheer physical reality. You can't spend cash you don't have. Japanese families used this system for generations, and it worked beautifully. Then Western families tried it, and it failed. Hard. Here's why. The system was designed for a cash-based economy where most transactions happened in person. Japanese society in the 20th century ran on cash. You paid your utilities in cash at a convenience store. You bought groceries with cash. You paid for transportation with cash. The infrastructure supported the system. Modern Western life is almost entirely digital. Your rent is auto-debited, your utilities are auto-paid, your subscriptions charge your card automatically. Your workplace cafeteria doesn't take cash. The parking meter requires an app. Your kids' school fees are paid online. Half your necessary spending happens digitally whether you like it or not. So you try the envelope system. You withdraw cash for groceries and gas and entertainment. But 70% of your spending still happens digitally through necessary automated payments. The envelopes only control a fraction of your budget. And that fraction isn't usually where your overspending problem lives. You end up with a hybrid system that's more complicated than helpful. You're managing envelopes for some things and cards for others. You're trying to track which category certain digital purchases belong to. You're constantly doing mental math to reconcile your cash system with your digital reality. And after 2 months of this friction, you give up. Not because you're undisciplined, because you tried to use a cash-based system in a digital payment world, and the friction was unsustainable. Think about your own spending. What percentage could realistically be converted to cash? And would controlling that percentage actually solve your budgeting problem? The lesson isn't that envelopes are bad. It's that you can't force a system designed for one infrastructure into a different infrastructure without major adaptation. Failed System 2, the zero-based allocation method for people with irregular income. Another celebrated Japanese system is zero-based budgeting. At the beginning of the month, you allocate every single dollar of income to a specific category: bills, groceries, savings, debt, entertainment. Every dollar has a job. You allocate to zero. Nothing is unassigned. This system is brilliant for people with predictable, stable income. You know exactly what's coming in. You know exactly what needs to go out. You assign everything in advance. You execute the plan. You start fresh next month. Japanese employment culture traditionally emphasized lifetime employment with stable monthly salaries. Perfect context for zero-based budgeting. You knew your income, you knew your expenses, you could plan with precision. Then, freelancers, gig workers, commission-based employees, and people with variable income tried this system, and it collapsed immediately. Here's the problem. You can't allocate every dollar when you don't know how many dollars you'll have. You might make $4,000 this month, you might make $7,000, you might make $2,000. Your income fluctuates wildly based on clients, projects, seasonal demand, and factors outside your control. So you try to make a zero-based budget work. You base it on your lowest expected income. But then you have a good month and you don't know what to do with the extra. Or you base it on your average income and you have a bad month and the whole plan falls apart. You end up in a constant state of replanning. You're making a new budget every week as your income becomes clearer. You're moving money between categories constantly. The system that was supposed to create clarity and control instead creates stress and constant adjustment. After 3 months of trying to make it work, you abandon it. Not because the system is bad, because it was designed for income stability you don't have. Think about your own income pattern. Is it genuinely stable and predictable month to month? Or does it vary significantly? The lesson isn't that zero-based budgeting doesn't work. It's that it works for specific income patterns and fails spectacularly for others. Failed System 3. The savings first percentage system for people already in debt. Japanese financial wisdom teaches paying yourself first. Before you pay bills, before you spend on anything, you save 10%, 20%. Whatever you've committed to, it goes to savings immediately. You live on what remains. This system is brilliant for building wealth when you're starting from zero or positive. You create a forced gap between income and lifestyle. You automate wealth building. You make saving non-negotiable. Families who do this for decades build substantial wealth almost by accident. Then people drowning in high-interest debt tried this system, and it made their situation worse. Here's why. The system assumes you're in neutral or positive financial position. You have no debt, or you have manageable debt at reasonable interest rates. Saving makes sense because you're building for the future without sacrificing the present too badly. But if you're carrying $5,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest, saving 10% of your income is mathematically insane. You're saving money that earns maybe 1% while paying debt that costs 22%. You're losing 21 percentage points every month. The system tells you to pay yourself first, but yourself includes the version of you that's bleeding hundreds of dollars in interest every month. That bleeding needs to stop before you start building savings. Otherwise, you're trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. People try the savings first system because it sounds wise and disciplined. They feel good watching their savings grow, but they ignore that their debt is growing faster. And after a year of diligently saving while carrying high interest debt, they've actually moved backwards financially. Think about your own situation. Do you have high interest debt? And if so, is building savings really the first priority, or should stopping the interest bleeding come first? The lesson isn't that saving first is bad. It's that the system has a prerequisite. You need to be out of high interest debt first. Otherwise, you're optimizing the wrong thing. But if those 3 failures made sense, the next 2 show how even genius systems can fail when motivation doesn't match method. Failed System 4. The delayed gratification purchase diary for people seeking instant dopamine. One Japanese budgeting practice is the purchase diary with waiting periods. Before buying anything non-essential, you write it in a diary with the date. Then you wait. 3 days for small purchases, a week for medium purchases, 30 days for large purchases. If you still want it after the waiting period, you buy it guilt-free. This system is genius for people whose overspending comes from impulse, not emotional regulation. If your problem is that you see something and buy it without thinking, the waiting period gives you time to think. Most impulses fade. You save money on things you would have forgotten about anyway. Japanese culture has historically valued delayed gratification. Patience is a virtue. Waiting is normal. The system fits the cultural context perfectly. Then, people living in instant gratification culture tried this system, and it failed in a specific, predictable way. Here's the problem. For many people, shopping isn't about the item, it's about the feeling, the dopamine hit, the momentary relief from stress or boredom or anxiety. They're not buying the thing, they're buying the feeling of buying. When you force these people to wait, you're asking them to sit with uncomfortable feelings for 3 days or a week or a month. And most people can't or won't do that. They need the dopamine hit now. So they don't write it in the diary, they just buy it. Or they write it in the diary and then immediately buy something else that isn't in the diary because they need the feeling right now. The system doesn't reduce spending. It just makes them feel guilty about the spending they're still doing. After a month of this, they abandon the diary. Not because waiting is bad, because they were using shopping as emotional regulation and the diary didn't address that underlying issue. Think about your own impulse purchases. Are you buying the item or are you buying the feeling of acquiring something new? The lesson isn't that waiting periods don't work. It's that they only work if impulse is your problem. If emotional regulation is your problem, you need a completely different solution. Failed System 5, the family financial meeting system for households with different money values. Japanese budgeting often involves regular family financial meetings. Everyone sits down weekly or monthly. You review spending together, you discuss goals together, you make decisions together, you're aligned, you're unified, you're on the same team. This system is beautiful when it works. Families report better communication, less money stress, and more financial progress when everyone is involved and informed. Japanese culture traditionally emphasizes group harmony and collective decision-making. Individual desires are balanced against family needs. Disagreement is worked through until consensus is reached. The cultural foundation supports the practice. Then, Western families with fundamentally different money values tried this system, and the meetings turned into fights. Here's the reality. If one partner values security and the other values experiences, sitting down to review spending doesn't create alignment, it creates conflict. One partner sees the vacation spending and feels stressed. The other sees the excessive saving and feels deprived. The meeting doesn't resolve the values difference, it highlights it. Or, one partner is naturally frugal and the other is naturally generous. The frugal partner sees waste everywhere in the spending review. The generous partner sees judgment and control. What was supposed to be collaborative planning becomes accusation and defensiveness. After 3 meetings that ended in arguments, they stop having meetings. Not because the system is bad, because they tried to use a meeting to solve a values alignment problem. And meetings don't change values, they just expose misalignment. Think about your own household. Do you and your partner fundamentally agree on financial priorities? Or are you trying to use a budgeting system to bridge a values gap? The lesson isn't that family financial meetings don't work. It's that they only work when values are already reasonably aligned. When they're not, you need couples therapy or financial counseling before you need budgeting meetings. What makes all 5 of these failures so common is that the systems look genius in isolation. Cash envelopes are brilliant. Zero-based budgeting is powerful. Savings first is transformative. Delayed gratification works. Family meetings create alignment, but genius in the right context becomes failure in the wrong context. And none of these systems come with warning labels. Nobody tells you that envelopes fail in digital economies, that zero-based budgeting fails with irregular income, that savings first fails when you have high-interest debt, that waiting periods fail when shopping is emotional regulation, that family meetings fail when values are misaligned. So people try them, people fail at them, and people blame themselves instead of recognizing that the context was wrong. You're not broken because a genius Japanese budgeting system didn't work for you. You just needed a different system, one designed for your actual context, your actual infrastructure, your actual income pattern, your actual financial starting point, your actual psychological relationship with money, your actual household dynamics. The Japanese systems work beautifully for the context they were designed for. But you can't force a tool designed for one context into a completely different one and expect the same results. So what do you do instead? You take the principles and adapt them. You don't need physical envelopes, but you can create digital spending limits that serve the same purpose. You don't need zero-based budgeting, but you can create a baseline budget with flexibility for variable income. You don't need to save while bleeding interest, but once debt is handled, savings first becomes powerful. You don't need a waiting period if you need emotional regulation tools first. You don't need family meetings if you need values alignment conversations first. The genius isn't in the specific system, it's in the principles underneath. Control spending, live below your means, save consistently, delay gratification, communicate about money. Those principles are universal, but the systems that implement them need to fit your life, not someone else's. If this resonated and you want to learn how to adapt financial wisdom to your actual context instead of forcing yourself into systems designed for different lives, subscribe to this channel. We explore what actually works in real situations with real constraints, not perfect systems for perfect circumstances, adapted approaches for messy reality. You'll find more honest guidance like this waiting for you.